Hello and welcome to Photography Out Loud at Home Edition. My name is Paul Davis.
Again.
And joined me, as always, is Joel. How you doing, bud? You okay?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah, good.
How's your week been?
Slightly boring, being isolated in, but apart from that, pretty good.
Sorry, the kitten is misbehaving. Oh, my life.
Oh,
Anyway, moving on.
and these are the lovely joys of being live. I can see that lag's a big issue again. That's just managed to
Standard.
kick in, just as we decided to go live.
Good times. Everybody's got to love a bit of lag. Oh dear, this is going to be extremely painful. Right, so there's no real news this week, or at least nothing. I think they mentioned the Z9 specs a little bit, but I don't think it's all confirmed yet. Well, I could be wrong, but there's not been any definite confirmations of things coming out. So we'll move on from the news. What has gone on this week? Oh, live streamed a funeral again on Monday, but didn't have to rely on 4G, which was nice. That was much better. I quite enjoy not having to run off battery power.
Yeah, and great having an internet connection when trying to live stream. It just helps a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of brought it home to me because the person who'd passed away, obviously there was a restriction on people that could fit into the church, but then there was like 70 people outside on the pavement. Some of them were watching it on their phones and kind of in groups watching it on the phone. And there's over 70 people watching it on live stream. So it shows you just how powerful technology has become in connecting us and allowing us to experience things together, which was a really cool experience, I think. So yeah, it's interesting to see technology kind of having that impact. And the people I did it for had emailed me back saying how grateful they were that other people were able to join and that people had contacted them and said thank you for making it happen. So that was a cool start to my week. So
yeah. It's nice that obviously you've enabled people to see a moment that they might have potentially missed. So yeah, no, it's a good feeling knowing that that we're able to actually do that for people, which is very nice. Yes. So last week we did a episode on organising your photographs. So and what we wanted to do this week is expand on a little bit of what we talked about last week, which is essentially just the start of organising sort of your pictures, how you're going to store them on your computer. How they are named and roughly how they are stored actually on your computer. So if you haven't done already, you can go back and watch that video. So all of our live streams that we do on Photography Out Loud are always recorded and put onto our Facebook and YouTube channels. And what we're going to do this week is continue on from there. So we are going to talk about backing up. Which is probably the one of it's quite an important part of obviously looking after your photographs. We talked a little bit last week about how it's really nice to go back and look through sort of your pictures that you've enjoyed over the years, but if they're not safe, then that is something that that you want to sort of go through and have a look at. And hopefully what we've done is set up some sort of fairly simple steps, and different ways that you're able to do backups. But also last week as well, we were talking about a lot. Well, Joel was talking a lot about about cataloging, and essentially we just wanted to dip into a little bit about what is an actual catalog, and what is the difference between using a catalog and not using a catalog. I know you're a big fan of a catalog, Joel.
I am. I love me Lightroom.
Yeah, So essentially, what a catalog is, and I know it's shown within Lightroom a lot. So Lightroom is the main software that uses this catalog organizing system. I know there are a couple of other sort of softwares out there that do it, but obviously Lightroom is the one that we're familiar with, and how that essentially works. But essentially, the difference between using a catalog and not using a catalog is that all your changes and tags are all stored in one place, which is it's got its fors and againsts. Personally, I feel that knowing that all my changes and all the information that I need is kept in one place, almost in one file, is really handy. It makes it a lot easier to back up this information, and it's what we're going to go into today about. But it also makes it a lot cleaner, looking after how you sort out through your pictures. But another big thing for me, and it was like the major sort of game changer in how I love a catalog, is that you can access your catalog without actually being with your photographs. So I know myself, and I know Joel does as well, we tend to do a lot of work on laptops, and laptops are not famously known for having a lot of storage built in. So you could actually store a Lightroom catalog on a laptop, but you could have your pictures sort of elsewhere, and you could still see all of those pictures. And depending on how you sort of build a catalog, you can still access them and enjoy them, which is one of the big things about a catalog.
For sure, and the ability to edit, and also to be able to tag everything and be able to separate jobs as well. So you can have a catalog for each job if you're a professional, or each year if you're that way inclined. You have the ability to kind of control different aspects and be able to back up different aspects, which I think is important. And also, I think the great thing about Lightroom, and I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, Bridge is great. I've never really got on with it, just for various reasons. And then obviously things like Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop. Love Photoshop. Okay with Adobe Camera Raw. I feel like it's a bit clunky sometimes, but that's just me. But to be able to combine, apart from the Photoshop part, which you can go into very easily with Lightroom, but to be able to combine Bridge and ACR, essentially. Internet, don't cry. I know they're different. I know they handle things differently, but let's just stick with it. But to be able to combine those two and to have a feature set that allows you to tag and interact and then edit at the same time and keep going back in the same program, it's just literally clicking between tabs, I find just amazing. And then also the functionality of syncing all images. So if you're shooting in the studio, for instance, or something that's very consistent, then you have that ability to sync all your settings very easily, which I love. And also, I was doing a one-to-one on Wednesday for a customer, and being able to do virtual copies as well. So you could try, different presets or black and white versus color and things like that. I think that's just amazing for creativity as well as for organization. So hence why I'm a massive fan of Lightroom and catalogs, and then also a big fan of backing them up, because if you lose it, it's annoying.
So all of those features potentially can be done with other pieces of software. So if we look at sort of a different way of how another piece of software would actually do that. So again, we looked at Lightroom last week, and also Bridge. So, Bridge can still do like the tagging, and it will even enable you to do like virtual copies and stuff like that. But rather than storing it in one place, what it will do is it will generate essentially a change file, which is known as an XMP file, that sort of sits next to the file. So, and if you're a Bridge user or potentially other software, if you go in through in with that software, you'll notice that all your pictures are there, and they've got your colors and potentially your changes that you've made. But if you go through the pictures, if you're on a Mac, if you go through it on Finder and actually go into that folder, you'll notice you have photo 001, and then underneath it, it's got photo 001.xmp. So again, you can still do the things generally within other pieces of software, but it's the way that it stores that information. So it will store it as an XMP file that sits sort of relatively close to that other file. And personally, I've always found that, again, if I wanted to access that data differently, you've always got to make sure that those files stay together. And I think as we move into more of the backup system, that's when it can become a little bit sort of more sort of involved.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's pros and cons to both. In some ways, it's way simpler to back up XMPs because they sit right next to the RAWs. But equally, I think the benefits of Lightroom and all the features that it can offer outweigh, because it's not difficult to back up a Lightroom catalog and then store it. So I definitely would advocate that it's not difficult to back up a Lightroom once you understand how it works. So. But let's get into it a little bit more, because I suppose there's two things where we need to think about when we're backing up. There's the image, whether that's a JPEG or a RAW or TIFF or DNG or whatever you want to call it, and then there's the working file. Either that can be in a catalog, like we've just been discussing, could be using something like ACR, Adobe Camera Raw, and it producing an XMP, or it might be that you use Photoshop for all of your editing, or Affinity or Capture One, and they'll store their files in proprietary formats. So for Photoshop, it's PSD. So we have to, I believe, break up our backing up into those two sections. So there's the RAW, but it can also be JPEG or TIFF or DNG, but we'll call it RAW just because it's untouched and it's unedited straight from the camera. And then we've got our files that we're working on, whether that's editing just for color or crop, or whether we're going to do a lot of cloning or whatever it is that you want to do, layer work. So first in your mind needs to be how you're going to back up the two. I would argue that the most important thing to back up is the picture that came off your camera, because if you lose your PSD, it's just a lot of work that you've lost, but you still have your image. Whereas if you lose your image, it doesn't matter how much work you put in, you're still not going to have anything to work on. So primary focus, I believe, would be your initial image, especially as Photoshop files can get very large over time. So understanding how much space you have is important for that side of things. So in the first instance, you're going to back up your card from your camera onto your computer. And that could be it, which is terrible, because if your computer dies because the hard drive dies or the SSD dies or the power supply dies or it gets a big cup of water spilt on it or red wine, or I don't know, the children decide to use it as a tennis racket. There's lots of very dire reasons why your laptop might stop functioning.
You have a very mischievous cat roaming around at the moment.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Would not be impressed. But fortunately, I have backups. But alas, you need to make sure that you understand that just because it's on your computer does not mean it's safe. I would argue it's less safe at that point than it ever has been, because at least when it was on your memory card, you understood that that was your only copy. But now you think it's on your computer and therefore it's safe, which it isn't. So the first port of call would be to plug in an external drive. That can be one of these kind of portable ones, or it could be the ones where you plug a power supply into the back and then you have another USB cable or Firewire cable or Thunderbolt cable, whatever it might be. And those are great because they're compact. That'll fit in a rucksack or a pocket really easily. It doesn't need any external power, the portable ones, so you only have to have the cable and the drive, which is great. so you can kind of work out in the garden if you wanted to. Now, that is one step better, because if you've got it stored on your computer and you've got it stored on your drive, then if one of those fails, then hopefully you've still got the information on the other.
We've
But
got 2 copies now.
But they're still in the same location. So, especially
Yep.
in the case of one of these portable drives, or even just any kind of hard drive, it's a spinning disk. It's basically like a vinyl record player, and it's going round and round. Or if you remember CDs and you'd walk down the street and you didn't have a Walkman with 45-second protection or whatever they used to call it, and it would skip, then you have the potential of losing all of your data because the head on the hard drive would damage the disc, like somebody holding down the arm of the vinyl record player and scratching.
Oh no.
Terrible, terrible. So if you have a mischievous cat like I do, and I've got my laptop set up and my spinning hard drive, and she decides to nibble on the cable and it falls off the desk, then my laptop could get damaged, but my drive could go flying, and the damage of the hard drive would also mean I've lost the data. So in that instance, you obviously need a backup somewhere else. So that could be the cloud, or it could be another external drive that you can keep, at a friend's house, another family member's house, at your workplace, anywhere that's not near your house. Preferably not next door, just in case there's a fire. Heaven forbid that you'd have a fire. But basically try and remove any kind of external forces that are local to you affecting your backup. Now, this can sound paranoid to a lot of people, and to some degree it is, because hopefully in the modern world, these things are less likely to happen. But equally, there's lots of very sad people around the world who have lost their information because they didn't have backups. Now, the other thing that we just spoke about was the spinning drive. So an SSD is great. You might have heard it before, solid state drive. Basically, it's like a massive memory card. So just imagine your SD card or your compact flash card with a USB cable. That's basically all it is. There's nothing really that different. But the great thing about that is you can wiggle it like this whilst it's plugged in. You could run a marathon or jump on a trampoline with an SSD. Maybe we need to get Paul on a trampoline with an SSD and show how this works. Hashtag that in the comments if you want. Yeah, exactly. And
see which
so
one breaks.
the benefit, yeah. So the benefit of that is if you've got the SSD plugged in, like I might do now, and the cat comes along and my laptop goes flying, as does the SSD won't even have realized what happened, and just unplug it, plug it into another computer, and all your data's still there. So SSD from a physical standpoint is great because there's not a whole lot to go wrong. Even potentially leaving it in water for a period of time, if you looked after it and wiped it down and dried it out, it'd probably still work, whereas a hard drive is very unlikely to still work after that. So the other great benefit of an SSD is just speed. It's just very fast. You can copy files across very quickly. So that's great. So if I show you this, this might make it hopefully a little bit easier. So the one external drive, if you could work on your pictures and store your pictures on your computer and then put them on an external drive once a week or whatever and take that away from your computer, that would be a bit safer because at least it's in 2 locations. Now, a step up from that would be having 2 external drives. So you'd have one external drive that you store all your pictures on at home with your laptop or your desktop, fine. And then the other one you take to work or to a family member's house or a friend's house. And every week you just swap them around. So they're always identical apart from the period of time from when you took the other hard drive away. So you just keep bringing them back and just cycle them around. It's a very common way of backing up. And then the other one that is probably most easily achievable by people, especially when we were in the pandemic and we couldn't go to people's houses, was have one external drive connected to your computer, and the other was putting it up in the cloud. So that could be Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, Google Drive, Backblaze, whatever you want. So the great thing about cloud, and if I want to keep this simple because I don't want it to become really crazy, but in the simplest way, if you can have an external drive connected to your computer, preferably unplugging it at a night and storing it safe, so the cat or the kids don't get hold of it, and then storing on the cloud as well, so it's outside of your house. Then at least you have the benefit of, if the external drive dies, you can go and copy it all back from the cloud onto the drive. That will take a lot of time, especially if you don't have great internet, but at least it would be available.
It's
It just
there.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
immediately available. Could take a few days, maybe a week, depending on how much you've got, or even longer. And some cloud providers actually provide the ability to send you all your information on an external drive. It obviously costs you, but you get to keep the hard drive. So that's probably the easiest way of achieving offsite backup, without having to do much. You don't have to go anywhere. So if you can't drive for whatever reason, or you've been ill, and you can't go anywhere, then that's probably the best way. And the great thing about simple backup is at least you have started to back up. That's the key.
Yes.
We're trying to get you just to start backing up. We can take you on these steps as we will now, and we can go back over this in the future. Or if you want to give us an email or a phone call or a message, we can help you build up this backup process over time. But it's relatively low cost. An external drive, probably about £100, depending on what size you go for. An SSD, probably about £150, £200, depending on what size you wanted. But at least if the computer has an issue, you should hopefully have your images backed up somewhere else, and vice versa. So if your external hard drive died, hopefully it'd still be on the computer, or it'd be in the cloud, ideally. But the one thing to remember is that a drive in a computer or an external drive could still fail, and there's no backup in that location. Like that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
But it also, that's a negative as well. So
you kind of have got to be a little bit paranoid when you do think about these things, but it's trying to safeguard and getting the point across. If I think you've got to maybe have a glass of wine when you're thinking about these sort of things and going, right, so if this happened to this drive, or if this happened, are my images safe? If this happened, are my images safe? And you've just got to run through some of those sort of not so nice scenarios, and
exactly.
thinking that is my data going to be safe if one of those things happened?
Yeah, it's no different to a lot of people probably storing a will, or deeds for their house at their house, and then at a solicitor's. Like there's those two locations that hopefully it's safe, and some people might store it up in the cloud as well, encrypted. So then you've got 3 backups of documents that are very, very important to you. So just bearing in mind that you can do your images and your working catalogs at this point as well. But when we move on, I'll show you how that might change. But just as we go through and we're getting closer and closer to this, we're trying to get to a point where we have 3 different backups in 2 different media types. Now we'll come on to this, but that could be like a USB drive and a cloud. Again, the internet, don't cry. I know that there's different ways of storing it. And then 1 offsite backup. The offsite backup, I would argue, is one of the most important points, because you only have to have an electrical issue that kind of fries your hard drive, a power surge, or you're writing to it and the power dies, and then it corrupts the disk, or it physically dies. Having something offsite is key to this. And again, it's not that difficult to achieve if you really think about it. And also, this is a good one. 2 is 1. 1 is none. So if you don't have 2 backups, you basically don't have a backup. Because if you think you only have 1 backup, then that backup could potentially die, or be destroyed, or be lost, or corrupted. So you must always have at least 2. So if you try and keep in mind that you're striving to get 2 backups at any time, and preferably 1 not in the same building as you.
Yeah, and also what, when we talk about backing up, so, you're saying 2 backups there, but that means that there's still an original floating around somewhere. So what you're trying to achieve is actually 3 copies of that file potentially, aren't you? So
Yeah,
you've
100%.
got the file that's on your computer, as it were, and then, as Joel's saying, 2 backups of that particular file or folder.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, we're going to move up a little bit now to intermediate backup.
Yeah.
So we have
This is
multiple
why I need to
external
take
drives.
notes now.
Yeah, that's true. So, ideally, you don't want to store any data on your computer if it can be avoided. That you can argue the point, but if you can have it on a separate working drive, preferably an SSD, that's a great scenario. Because if your computer dies, just pull out the SSD or the hard drive and go and find another computer, buy another computer. Obviously, this is more for those people that are kind of in the professional realm where they really need to get their images edited and away to the customer, whether that's commercial or wedding or whatever it might be. But to be able to just take your data out of your computer and go and take it to another computer, could be your friend's computer if you're kind of that semi-pro level, or at work if you're editing something and it goes wrong, you just pull the drive out and walk to somebody else's computer and ask them to use their computer whilst you get it sorted. So in that case, you're not having to open up the computer, and if the computer's physically damaged, then you're not you've actually got something to take away with you. So again, the paranoia is building, but it's good to be paranoid in this instance. So then you'd have your working drive, but then also whilst you're working on it, you might also have a synchronization, or you might plug it in at the end of the day where you back it up to an external drive. And that can be one of these portable ones or the plug-in ones, power-driven one. And just so everything you've been working on that day is backed up. And then you'd have another drive that's your offsite one, which you would be rotating, from your house or workplace or whatever. And then also it'd go up to the cloud at the same time. So you've got backups both right next to you. So if your working drive wasn't functioning properly or whatever, or you had to move a system, you'd have your working drive ready to go, but you'd have a backup of it on an external drive at the end of the day. And then you'd have the offsite external drive, and that's in a different location, and you're just rotating that drive every time you go to work or go to your friend's house or whatever. And then it's in the cloud as well. So again, it's accessible, but it might take you a while. So if you are on a tight deadline of a few hours, like cloud backup might not be, the easiest to get hold of. So then you go to your offsite or have it next to you. So the great thing about this is, if the computer fails and your external on-site drive dies, you've still got your offsite and you've still got your cloud. So you've got 3 backups, okay? Because the working drive doesn't really count as a backup because you're actually working on it. Now, the big issue here, and this is going to blow people's minds if they don't understand, but these drives aren't mirrored. So the external drive, if it dies, that's it. You can't access your information. So you're relying on the next external drive. Now, if so, that it means you're going to have to drive to wherever you store your other drive, which could be half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on your commute, or wherever your family or friends live. Or you're going to have to wait for the cloud to download, and if your internet's not very good, that could take a while. So you're still relying on a drive working. Now, if we move on to advanced, this is like getting to ultra paranoid. But this is a great place to live if you can afford it, because it's more expensive this way. And if you're not earning money from your photography, then this is going to be harder and harder to justify, because at advanced backup level, in whatever guise, is that you have to understand that you can, if it's just images and you want to protect them, then simple or intermediate view work, because you can just keep sending them away.
This is almost like your images are money at this point, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
So where it would cost you way more to lose them than the money you'd spend on keeping them.
So,
for sure.
If you're like a fine art landscape photographer and, this original sort of full resolution image, actually has a value to it. You can you potentially need to do a print from it and things like that, then this is where an advanced system sort of really comes into play.
Yeah, for sure. And so at this stage, your working drive might be an SSD, but in ideal scenario, you'd use a DAS, which is a direct attached storage. Sounds very confusing, but basically it has at least 2 drives in it. These could be SSD or they could be hard drives, and they're set up in what's called RAID. Now, don't worry about what these acronyms mean necessarily. RAID just means again, internet, don't cry, but in RAID, there's various versions of RAID, but in RAID, I think it's RAID 1 or 0. I can't remember which one, but basically they're mirrored. So if you have 2 drives, this drive is identical to this drive. So if drive A has 1,000 images on it, then drive B will have 1,000 images of it, and they'll look exactly the same. You wouldn't be able to tell them apart, but they're stored in a box. It can be just an aluminium case or a plastic box, just with a USB or whatever. It's just consider it a box at this point. And it just means that if one of the drives dies, the other drive will kick in and be able to work. And you can just slide one drive out, put a new one in. So in professional situations, they would have multiple drives in a cupboard somewhere ready to replace because they just know a drive will die at some point. So they'd pull this drive out, pop a new drive in, and this drive would start copying itself over to that so that within an hour or a day, they'd both be identical again. But you can already see that if this drive dies, you can immediately carry on working because you have this drive. So that, from a professional standpoint, is incredible because this one goes down, it sends you an alert and says, I've just died. And you can go, oh no, I can still work. I just need to replace this drive as soon as possible. So you can carry on. Okay. And then you go to the next level where you'd have on site, I should have got a picture of this, but a NAS, which is a network attached storage device, which is pretty much the same as DAS. So there could be 2 drives, or they could be 3 drives, 4 drives, up to however many drives you want, depending on how much space you need. But again, 2 drives, but this time they're accessible via a network cable. So they don't even have to be in the same room as you. They don't have to be on the same floor. They could be downstairs in the basement or up in the attic or another office. But it's accessible via the internet, which is an important part of the backup process. But you have everything on there. And if a drive dies, then you just replace it and carry on. Now, if you have more drives, then you're reducing the probability statistically that you could lose a drive. So, if you've got 4 drives, 1 dies, then it's easier for you to replace that 1 drive, put it in and copy it across. This is like ultimate geekdom, but it's amazing. So you've got all of that. So not only do you have double backup in 1 drive, the one that you're working on, you also can have it automatically backing up to your NAS drive, which is in the same building. You can then store, and this is the point where having the network cable is really, really useful, is that you can have one of those NAS drives in another office that might be in another town or city or even country, or you could store it at a friend's house, etc. It's what we do. We have 2 NAS drives in 2 different locations, one at the shop and one somewhere else. But they will talk to each other and replicate. So when this information changes, it will say, I've changed, I need to send it to that drive that's off-site. So it will send it. So you're not even having to pick up the drive, taking it in your car or your bicycle or walking to wherever it is that you're going to swap. So there's no swapping. So you're literally not having to think about it because it'll automatically do it. So now you've removed the need to go anywhere, spend any fuel or energy or time, and it's doing it automatically. So even if you forget, or if you're on holiday and somebody else is working on files, it can be sent automatically. So this part is magic because you've essentially started having your own version of Dropbox in different locations. Now, the next stage to that, as you can see, paranoia is growing. Yeah. Paranoia is growing, but you can also have your NAS drive upload to a cloud. So that could be Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, Box, Backblaze, whatever, or Amazon version. So you can have that information going up to the cloud. So you've got your own private cloud, essentially in your offsite NAS, and then you're also sending it to a cloud. So at this point, you're having to have your working drive die, your NAS drive, so like 2 drives die in your NAS or more, 2 die in your offsite NAS or more, plus the whole internet essentially dying before you can lose your images. So statistically speaking, I should have found out what the probability of this is, but it's very, very low. Hopefully, that you would lose all of your images irrecoverably by having all of these points die. Now, to go even more paranoid,
We're going to
on
keep
your
going.
cloud, yeah, on the cloud, you could have 2 cloud storages. So, for instance, you could have Dropbox, which is great for accessing on your phone, and you can instantly access it based on your bandwidth, obviously. And then you could move to another version of cloud storage called cold storage. So this is where information is put, and you probably never access it ever again, but it is there in case you need it. So you have hot storage, which is Dropbox, which is more expensive because they're essentially saying you can access it at any time of day or night.
As and when, on multiple platforms. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas cold is almost like archiving it in the middle of nowhere in a bunker, which is essentially what they do. And you don't access it. And if you do, you essentially have to request access to it. So imagine cold storage is like your ISA that you're not allowed into for at least a year. Okay. And hot storage is like your current account, which you're allowed to go and get money out of whenever you like, online or at the bank. So as you can see, the more that your information is worth to you, so your images, the more that is worth to you in terms of making money or just sentimental. Let's not think that sentimentality isn't important. Your costs will go up, but your safety goes up massively. But also at this point, ease improves as well, because at any of these points you can access without leaving your house or your place of work, or a hotel, because at all of these stages you can access it with an internet connection. Now, yes, internet connections can be spotty at best, but at least you know it's there. And also because it's stored multiply as well, so even if your internet stops working, you've still got your SSD, you've still got your NAS drive, and they're still backing up essentially until the internet comes back on. So you have this ability without the internet to still keep your data very safe, especially with a RAID, because it's backed up multiple times. So this is where every stage is mirrored, so it's almost double backed up, and then it means that it's in multiple locations around the world. So
it's the inception really, of backup. This is
it's really, really unlikely that you'd lose all your data completely, which is massive. Considering, okay, if you were to work for a large client and you were getting paid 100,000 for images, and you essentially only get paid for the images that you hand over to the client, so you're not getting paid an hourly wage. You're literally just getting 100 grand for 10 images, for instance. If those 10 images somehow vanish, you're down 100 grand and unlikely to ever get a job doing photography again. Because if somebody turns around and says, well, that photographer is great, except they lost my images and I never got them back. And that client has spent 200 grand with a studio and models and makeup artists and time and all of these things, and they need it next week. Like you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to be very happy or your client's going to be very happy, and your reputation will be in tatters as well. So you can see that the paranoia, it seems a bit odd for us perhaps to think in these massive numbers, but that's why we have to have these multiple backups. And that's where it's important to understand where you could get to and how you could achieve that level of certainty at a lower cost. So, you don't necessarily have to have the RAIDs, but having the ability to connect to your hard drive offsite through a network, so it's plugged into another computer and you can just access it as a shared drive over the internet, that's going to be fantastic if you're not very good at remembering to go and take that hard drive with you and back it up. So there's and the cloud storage is getting cheaper and cheaper. It's really easy to interact with. You don't need to learn any code. You can just drag and drop in many cases. So you can see that the more you understand about how to keep your data safe, you can figure out your own strategies for keeping it safe. Now, there's different costs associated with this. Obviously, there's the equipment costs if you were to buy NAS drives and pay for cloud storage. But
Yeah.
equally, how much storage space do you really need? Because are your raw images that important to you? Or are you this type of person that will take your 100 raw images, edit them all within, maybe a few days, and that's all? You don't even keep your raws normally. So if that's the case and you're happy with that, then you can store 100 JPEG images from a day of shooting for what, maybe less than a gig of data,
Yeah.
maybe a bit more, depending on size of the camera that you use and what size images you need. So storing a gig of data for 10 years is going to cost you virtually nothing. Whereas if you have 10,000 raw files and you need to keep all of them, it's going
Yeah.
to cost you a significant amount of money, both in cloud storage and then hard drives, etc., etc. So try and also understand what it is you want to keep safe, because I
Yeah.
would argue that if you just want your images safe, you're not that fussed. You've got that special moment of your child being christened or baptized or blowing out their first birthday cake, or your grandparents. You've got that as a picture that you really want to be kept safe. So you don't really need the raw images because you just care about the memory. Then that's way cheaper and way easier to keep safe
Yeah.
than if you need to store, 100,000 raw files because of your job, and you need to go back and be able to edit them. That's a big deal. So I think one of the important takeaways from understanding how to back up your data is understanding what you're trying to achieve. If you want to back up everything, it's going to cost you a lot. If you only want to back up certain amounts of data, that's going to be easier and cheaper, and also less onerous on having to keep the automation going and remembering to do things. So that's one of the things I'd definitely suggest that people consider when they're backing up their data is why are they trying to back it up? So,
Yeah, and it's about asking those, sometimes harder questions, isn't it? It's just like, if I lost this, this raw file, that I can edit and do lots of different things, if I lost that, is it going to be the end of the world? You mentioned like, christening or birthday party and stuff like that. You know, would you be bummed out? Yes, but would it be a case of how much are you bummed out by it? Do you want to, would you want to go back and edit those things? And like you said, it's not an option that you can't have. It's just you need to bear in mind that if you do go down that route, that you want to keep every raw file, that you've got to be aware of potentially how many hard drives you're going to be buying or how much more money you're going to be spending on cloud storage as well.
because even at that point, you could say, I don't need cloud storage because they're pictures that I can put on a hard drive and I can take to, my friend who lives in Scotland, and I can leave them there because I'm unlikely to add to them for another year until the next time I go and visit them. So if
Yeah,
that's the case, you don't essentially need cloud storage because you don't need to access them straight away. And if you really needed them, you could drive there or ask them
yeah,
to copy
yeah,
them over to a USB and send them in the post. So understanding what it is that's most important to you is a key to figuring out what's the most cost effective solution. We don't live in a world where they're giving out hard drives for free. We don't live in a world
no,
where they're giving out terabytes and terabytes of cloud storage for free. It's going to cost. And cloud storage costs as a subscription. It's very rare that you'll find a cloud storage company that will allow you to pay £100 for 10 years and that's it. They're going to want £10 out of you every month, essentially. So understanding that continuing cost, I think, is important. Also, we've just spoken about RAWs and JPEGs and whether that's important. Now, some people would argue that it's more important for them to keep hold of what they did to their images rather than
yeah,
keeping, the final images, the exported images. So keeping your Lightroom catalog safe is very important. Now, if you don't understand Lightroom very well, then Lightroom has a catalog, but then every week, I think that's the default. You can ask for it to be more often or less often, but also ask to back up your catalog. Now, that's very, very useful, but it's not very useful if you store them on the same drive and the drive gets corrupted.
Which I may add, for some reason is the default. So
yeah,
I don't know why,
bizarre.
but the default for backing up your Lightroom catalog is right next to your actual catalog.
Yeah. So the key is
Genius.
to get that Lightroom backup as far away from your
Somewhere
Lightroom
else.
catalog as possible. So that might look like you manually doing it every week when it asks you. You go, okay, I'll go and put that in, on a different hard drive, or it might be that you put it on a thumb drive, and that thumb drive is just for your backup Lightroom catalog, which is fine. But equally, it's less of an issue, I would argue, if you have it in multiple places. But the key disclaimer there is if your Lightroom catalog becomes corrupt for whatever reason, and you don't realize, and it's allowed to propagate across all of your storage solutions, you're going to have a corrupt storage of a corrupt catalog of your Lightroom catalog everywhere. And it's unlikely that you'd have any sort of versioning. Now, this is where cloud is very, very useful because of the way that they store their data. Is that with Dropbox, I think it's 30 days. If you delete something, you can go and recover it, or you can actually version back. So you can go, well, I need the version that was 7 days ago because that's when it was working fine. I'd been away for a week and I hadn't touched Lightroom. So it obviously happened on the 6th day and I need to go back to the 7th day. So in that instance, you can go onto your cloud and go, I'll go back to that version, download that version, copy it back to the start of the process, and it'll fill in all of the gaps again. Again, this is more for people that are in a professional capacity where it's very, very important if things like this go wrong that they can go back. But again, this is where cloud is a very big part of it. All of that to say, and we've done this for several of our customers already, we will happily sit down with you, whether it's virtually like this or in the shop, and we'll sit down and work out a strategy for how you store your photos. And we can start at the very beginning.
What's best for you as well. It's
Yeah,
finding
exactly.
out whether you need to go like, full bore Joel paranoia or something a little less.
Yeah, exactly. And we will help you even from the very beginning, from importing, how you set up your folders, how you're going to use Lightroom, backup Lightroom, etc., and how many points of failure we can build into you. And you can say to us, I've only got a few £100. How's best to store my information? And we'll help you find the most cost-effective solution. Or if you come to us and say, I've got £3,000, I need to get to a point where I can be assured that my stuff is not going to get lost, and we'll help you with that as well. Also, I was going to say, no, it's gone. What was I going to say?
Gone.
No, carry on.
Gone.
And so we will help with that, and we will help you automate it as well. There's very good backup software. So if you're on a Mac or Windows, we can help set up ways of doing this so that you're unlikely to lose your data, and you don't have to remember. It'll just keep cycling round and round.
Just do it for you.
And you'll just get an email or a notification on your laptop or desktop that says, I had a failure, I need fixing. So that's something we'd be more than happy to help you with, because it's really important that you might spend, this was the point I was going to make, you'd spend, $3 or $4 grand on a camera and lenses and very fast memory cards, etc. And then you're going to stick all of your pictures for 10 years on one drive that's only cost you £100. I don't know what the percentage would be, but I know that in like hi-fis and stuff, they'd say spend 5 or 10% of your overall budget on cables to make sure you get really good cables, quality cables. So I would say maybe work to that. If you are going to spend 4 grand on your equipment, then spend £400 on making sure you're backing up your images properly. Because
Yeah.
we have so many people come into us and say, oh, I'd like a new camera, new lenses, etc. They spend a lot of money. And then when you start speaking to them about what they do and keeping their images safe and how do they edit them, they don't have a clue. And that's no like shade thrown on people that don't know, because it can be complicated, and we completely understand that. But I would really urge you to understand how to keep your images safe, because we have a data recovery service and we can't always recover everything. But the amount of times we've had people who've lost holiday photos, wedding photos, christening photos, all of those important images, or even pros who have lost data from commercial jobs and weddings, etc., come to us and ask us to find their information for them. Like, that is not a conversation we enjoy having, because it's not always the happiest if we can't get the information back. So honestly, please don't put it off. Really think about how to back up your information. And if you do need help, if you do need help, just give us a shout, because we'd love to help you. So
yeah, we'd like to do it this way round rather than talking about how we can recover a memory card. So yeah, 100%. No, definitely. Well,
should we go through the comments?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
So, but
we'll start with an easy
one. Yeah.
Goodness.
What the hellos that we missed from the beginning.
Yeah, you go. I think you're going to say something.
Go on. Okay. I can't remember what I was going to say now. Comment away.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Ian says, hi guys, is Paul still in quarantine? And Joel, are you trying to grow a ZZ Top style beard? Paul is still in quarantine. Hopefully he's free on Tuesday, all being well.
Yeah.
And am I growing a ZZ Top style beard? I went to the barber's yesterday. So
that's exactly what I asked for.
Yeah. He definitely trimmed my beard. So maybe it's because normally I have beard kink and it looks shorter because I've had a mask on for more of the day, and maybe this is just normal. But no, I'm not going for a ZZ beard. Just hides my double chins. It's great. It's the best reason to have a beard. Sue says, so important, which I think was about backing up images when we first started talking about it at the beginning.
I think it's more about the beard, but carry on.
Nick Can says, hi everyone. Hi Nick Can, good to see you. Right, I think these are the beginning of the more deep comments. So Snowden says, I have the initial raw images in a folder. Inside the same folder I make 3 folders: PSD, JPEG and web. I save the whole folder on an external drive and back it up on another. Works well for me, which is great. The only thing I would say is missing is getting it on the cloud or on a drive that stays at somebody else's. Because the problem is, God forbid, if you had like an electrical issue, a power surge, or a fire, for instance, or flooding, and you've lost everything that's in your house at that point. So your backup solution is great up until the point of having it offsite. So if you can get it offsite somewhere, that would be perfect, because you've nailed it in terms of your folder structure. Like, that workflow is great, and having the 2 external drives is great as well, because you have built-in redundancy at that point. It's just the offsite backup. It's that the 3, 2, 1. You just need the 1, which is the offsite backup part. But no, it's encouraging to hear that you've got that sorted, because a lot of people don't. So Nick Can says, the change in card types from CF to CF Express Type B and Sony Type A, a new SDHC to SD Express and memory, does the type of backup system need to be re-examined? I would argue not, because it still works on the basic philosophy of having different media, SSD and external hard drive and cloud. Speed is probably part of it, but as cards are getting faster and larger in capacity, so are hard drives. And speed, yes, hard drives are slower, but you can write to an SSD very, very quickly. And then as part of that, you can start writing to a hard drive. Now, I didn't mention this because I didn't want to get too technical, But some NAS drives, like the ones that we use, Synology DS920 Plus, I think, actually have 2 bays for SSD caching, and then 4 bays for hard drives, and then you can buy a 4-bay extender. So yeah, I think that, or 5-bay, so it goes to
You're
9
running out
bays.
fingers
So
there,
it's
mate. Yeah.
I know, yeah. Woo. But those 2 SSDs allow the whole process to go faster, because essentially, you'll write your information to the SSDs first, so it's caching them, which is the same as your camera buffer. So it can start ingesting that information from your computer, from your memory cards, or your SSD, because you can actually plug an SSD into the front of it and it'll ingest it that way, which is an even better process. And then as it's put it on the SSDs, it'll then start writing to the hard drives as well. Just like your camera will take the images from the buffer onto your CF card or SD card or CF Express or whatever card it is that your camera uses. So you can see the same functionality working in a NAS drive, NAS box. So yeah, that I haven't really read too much about people being too concerned about the workflow from that perspective. There will be some speed issues, but I don't think there's anything too severe in there that would greatly hold you up. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
And at that point, if I am wrong, you just start writing onto more SSDs, because you could write to 2 SSDs from the same computer as you were ingesting, and you could take one and plug it into somewhere into the NAS drive, and then the other one into another computer to write to another external drive. So I would say that with USB-C and gigabit and 5 gigabit and 10 gigabit Ethernet, the speed isn't too much of an issue, and neither is the capacity, because you can buy very big drives.
Yeah.
And
I think if you're asking these types of questions, you're probably at the refining stage anyway. So, and again, it's just what is ever better for you at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, if you're getting to that point where you need that much speed and redundancy, you've probably moved into a very high pro level where you should be able to afford faster systems to keep up, I would argue. So Nick Can says, just because somebody may be paranoid regarding their backup routine doesn't make them wrong. 100%. What's the song lyrics? Just because you think they're after you doesn't mean they're not. I'm sure it's a Nirvana song. But yeah, I think paranoia with backup is super important, because you'll never be sorry, apart from your bank balance, that you are paranoid about backing up your data. I can't see any downside to it apart from the time it takes. But again, most of it can be automated, and you can make cups of tea and watch Netflix whilst you're waiting for it to back up. Or go to work and come back and it'll be still backing up. Especially after this week, eh? If anybody needs a recommendation of what to watch on Netflix, contact Paul. He's watched everything on there.
Yeah. So my to-do list, there's Netflix, and there's just a tick by it, because I've done Netflix.
Did you get an achievement award?
Yeah, I had a little badge pop up on my Chrome. Carry on, sorry.
Nick Can says, I've seen these new NVMe M.2 7000 megabits per second SSD drives. Looks great. They do. They look expensive as well, but they're super, super fast, which is impressive. And I think the Synology, the SSDs that you use are actually NVMe. I can't remember which ones, but they should be pretty fast, because they're good enough to use for video, which is a whole nother world of pain in terms of storage. If anybody's into video and into geek stuff, watch Linus Tech Tips, because he builds these massive server arrays. Like, they're fantastic. He even customizes the outsides. He works with another company to do it, but he goes and sets it up for YouTubers who have. If you want to feel the pain of backing up data, watch some of the popular YouTubers try and learn on the fly to back up all their information. And Marcus Brownlee of MBKHD, he shoots on Red cameras at 8K. So look at his workflow. It's insane the amount of data he's got to store. So I count myself very lucky that I don't have to store 8K footage. So Nick Can also says, back up to 5 different places in Dropbox, Google Drive, and 3 different external SSD drives. But the drives I use have as part of the deal free recovery system. Yeah, and again, that's like getting to that point where cost is less of an issue because you just want to be able to buy. Have I frozen? Oh, I think I froze for a brief period. But basically,
you actually you went, but you're back.
Okay, I'm back again. Good. But having it in those 5 different places is very useful. But the 3 different external SSD drives, one of them at least should be in a different location. I would argue it's almost pointless to have 3 external SSD drives if one's not somewhere else. I can't see any point to it. You use the Samsung SSD 980 Pros, very fast drives. Blimey neck, lad. Backup with dual layer Blu-ray player discs to cover all bases. Good as me. Well, you're hitting number 2, which is different media, which is good. That must cost you a fortune in Blu-ray. Don't store anything on my laptop or desktop computers. RAID configuration setup. Yeah, no, it's
Nick Khan knows.
He does. Hi, we talking backups? We are. So far, I've spent several hours backing up a few terabytes of data from one backup RAID to another offsite one. Such fun. Yes, it's painful.
Yeah.
With the Synology, incidentally, we're not sponsored by Synology. Other RAID drives exist, but you can actually take both of the drives.
Unless Synology want to send us one,
give us some.
Yeah. Happy.
Yeah. But you can put both. You can put both of them together on the same network, and copy them much faster that way. You're not having to go. So you could use. I think it'll go up to 2 gigabit when they're next to each other. It's not got a 10 gigabit connection. So, I feel your pain though. Moving terabytes of data is very painful. So, I'm glad it's very helpful for newbies. You have your camera insurance extra cover in case my software breaks and recovery system is needed. Yeah, I think that's important for pros, isn't it? Just to have that. Ultra paranoid sounds like me. Do I get bonus paranoid points if I'll back that up to LTO tape later? Yeah, if you're going to back up terabytes of data to tape, then I think you need I don't know what you need, a crown probably. You need one of those blue plaques. Goodness me, that'd be painful. Gordon says RAID 1 mirroring has one basic flaw. You delete a file from one drive by accident, it's also gone from the mirror in milliseconds. It is, and that is an issue. But if you're working on RAID like that, depending on the frequency of your backing up, then I would argue if your setup is fairly regular, then by the time you've realized you've deleted one, hopefully it'll have backed up and you can go back to it, which is. I've not spoken about this, but maybe I should. Dropbox is also a great way of working on stuff because you could have your Dropbox on your computer. You could work on it on your computer, which again I said you shouldn't do, but equally you could because you could have Dropbox going up, working onto your SSD, or I'm not sure if Dropbox will look at an SSD, but I think if you set up a synchronization software, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah,
and then you could version on Dropbox. So in that case, if you did delete a file by accident, I would argue unless it's massive, it probably would have gone up to Dropbox in that time. So you could go onto Dropbox and go back and download it because it'll give you 30 days to realize. Again, another benefit of working on the cloud because you have that ability to version. And they don't charge you for versioning either. I think it costs you more if you want longer than 30 days, but I think 30 days is quite a long time to have realized you've deleted the wrong file. So I use 3 SSD drives and 2 card readers while at an event. Makes sense. Have redundancy, especially if one card reader stops working. So Andrew says, having more drives actually increases the possibility of failure, but it allows you to have RAID levels that offer protection for more than one failure. Yeah, it's one of these things where you increase your number of drives. So yes, one could die more readily, but equally you're decreasing the likelihood of losing anything because you've spread it across more locations, essentially. And it does depend on what RAID you use because there are hybrid RAIDs available, which reduce hopefully the chance of disks dying. And also the great thing about most modern drives, although it's been going for years, is smart, which allows the hard drive to tell you when it's about to die. So you can actually pull the drive out and putting it back in before it does. So there you go. Andrew Gordon says, Andrew, I backed mine up to OneDrive and Dropbox. It took several days, even with fiber broadband. It does take a long time to do that, but like I think I mentioned, you can actually also send your hard drive to some companies. So you could make a duplicate of your data, send it away. They'll pick it up via courier, so recorded delivery, and then actually plug it directly into their servers for you and copy all the data, and then it's there. It's more costly, but it definitely save you a lot of time. I think people like AWS, Amazon Web Services offer that, and I think maybe Backblaze do, but don't quote me on that. But there definitely are services where they will courier your hard drives with your information to back it up, and they'll also courier hard drives back to you with your data if you did lose all on-site data backup.
Yeah.
So there are people that really have to be paranoid because of the jobs that they're in, and so there's already services available to make this a lot easier for you. So Andrew says, once you own a lot of hard drives, you start to understand how often they fail, so be careful out there, folks. SSDs are not perfect either and tend to give less warning. It's true, and that's where the two media types becomes very important: SSD and hard drive. It's a big deal to have the different storage medias. You get the benefits of both, but also the cost of both. So either or. Nick Hand says he shoots dual cards and split with RAW and JPEG and split each card to 3 external drives on cloud and 2 RAID storage devices. I have my RAW and JPEG split and labeled for day, month, year, location, event. Sounds like you got it nailed. Andrew says, Gordon, the first online backup I did took months. Not too bad for photography thereafter, but with video, you can end up with periodic big updates. Yeah, it's frustrating, and hopefully we'll all be on the like 100, gigabit fiber at some point, so life will be a bit easier. Gordon says most consumer hard drive failures are actually caused by the user knocking the drive and plugging the external drive when it's being written to, etc. Worked in IT for 43 years, and the number of drive failures in data centers in recent years was minimal. It's very true. And also, I think Backblaze actually give a report every year of what drives they've used and how many times that they failed, so you can get a good idea of what drives are very good. So you obviously do have to be careful, and again, that's why if you have multiple drives over multiple locations, hopefully you shouldn't have to worry too much. Gordon says, maybe with lack of light under a mask, it's like rhubarb and grows faster in the dark. Okay. Oh dear. Andrew says, I usually lose one a year from about 25. They're in NAS drives, but not in a controlled environment like a data center. Yeah, and the thing is, in NAS drives, you kind of expect it because they're always on. That's why I was saying that if you can unplug your drive at night or when you're not using it, obviously wait for it to write all the data, safely eject it, then you're not asking it to run all the time. It's like asking a car to,
just to
be fine for running 24 hours a day. It's going to need more looking after if it's being used continuously. Whereas if it gets time to not be used, there's less wear on it over a given period of time. So Nick Han says, drive stored in fireproof saves as added bonus. Yeah, we didn't mention that, but that's another great benefit of storing it in portable drives. You can put it in a safe as well. And if you wanted to be ultra paranoid, you could go and take it to a bank that has safety deposit boxes, and you could store it in a safety deposit box as well. It sounds very like Hollywood, that, doesn't it? Going to store your hard drives in a safe deposit box.
I was already thinking when I was reading your backup advanced section, like I'd need to get in contact with someone like Mission Impossible to try and delete all your data if I needed to anyway. So, but why not? Why not check in the safety deposit box?
Yeah, exactly. There's actually companies that will store your data in super secure locations, like i.e. in the side of a mountain with like nuclear grade security. It's bonkers, but you can imagine that data must be very, very important. And I suspect you probably can't afford to keep your data that safe. But there we go. So Snowden says, all my best images are on Flickr also. That's the great benefit of, online social media platforms like Flickr, where if you can store high res images, you kind of get a free backup
Yeah.
as well. Gordon says, don't do much in terms of video, just not my thing. Yeah, you've got to really enjoy video to have to back it up so often, because goodness me, like so much data to back up. So Nick Hand says, seen both Marquez, Brownlee, and Linus. Yeah, they get pretty serious with their backup stuff. So Ian says, great information from you two, but we can have a light show next week. Talking about next week, we've got Molly Darlington, Canon ambassador, on to do an interview with us. So yeah, it'll be different. I'm not sure how light it is. Maybe she's very technical. I have no idea. But yeah, hopefully we'll be a bit more light on the technical side of things. And I don't want anybody to think that this is beyond kind of comprehension. It really isn't. And if for whatever reason you're not sure, please do contact us. Much rather have a conversation about, like Paul was saying, helping you back up stuff in a very, very simple way. In the case of most people's computers, if you've got it on a laptop and you can bring it into the shop, we can set up automatic backing up through things like ChronoSync or Time Machine backup or whatever. So we can make it simple as well. I don't remember things terribly easily in terms of like automation, so I've got a lot of my stuff just automatically backs up, even to the point where for some of my customers, I've got it so they plug in a drive and it'll automatically know a drive has been plugged in, and it'll automatically start uploading it to external drives, and it'll automatically go up to Dropbox. So it's definitely achievable. So Dropbox doesn't recommend external drives, but I use it this way, as long as you don't disconnect the external drive. Like my external drive goes to NAS Dropbox on OneDrive. So yeah, that's cool. There's technical sides to how to do it most effectively. Nick Hand says Marcus Brownlee and Linus Tech was interesting. I also worked as a systems analyst and network administrator in the financial services sector. Goodness me. Oh dear. Gordon says, no. The worst thing you can do to a hard drive is turn it off and on. Continuous running a drive is way more reliable. Don't switch off NAS drives, external drives. Most of the time for them to fail is on power up. That's one of the reasons that hard drives and data centers are so reliable. Okay. I'm not going to argue with you because obviously you're very intelligent. I definitely don't recommend switching off NAS drives because they are literally designed to be used all the time. So things like Seagate, Iron Wolf, and Iron Wolf Pro are designed to run all the time. I just thought, because external drives, having read a lot and spoken to various other technical people, that running external drives all the time, they weren't designed to be accessed all the time in that way. So I suppose a halfway house is to leave them plugged in, but not writing or reading all the time. Therefore, they're not having to be used so much. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that you know a lot about stuff like this, so I won't argue. I'm just going off previous conversations with the people that I know in the tech industry. So, but I definitely know that NAS drives shouldn't be switched off, because that's why those hard drives were designed in that way. I just thought that if you are running external drives plugged into a computer and powered on, you've got more risk of surge issues. So obviously a surge protected extension lead would be very useful. And we run both of our NAS drives on UPSs, uninterruptible power supplies. So if the power does go off, there's essentially a massive battery sitting next to each of them, so that they will run long enough to automatically shut down and will automatically turn back on when the power is restored. So that's another key thing. But goodness me, if we went into all of these things, we'd be here even longer than an hour and 15 minutes. But thank you for all your comments. I love technical stuff, as you can probably tell. But equally, those of you that aren't technical, please don't let this have scared you off. Even if you just have an external drive and back up to it, that's one step better than just storing it on your laptop or desktop. I would much rather you do that than nothing at all. And if you can possibly get it onto the cloud, you'll be a very happy person, because at least then you're getting somebody like Gordon, who's very up on the IT side of things, looking after your data all the time. So there we go.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you for all those wonderful comments. It's nice to see that people are really passionate about something, and I think also in there as well is that there's a sense of enjoyment of it as well. We see it with the gear that we own. It's nice to have a nice lens. It's nice to have a nice camera, and sometimes it's nice to have a nice backup system as well, isn't it? So
exactly. The peace of mind, I think, is worth it.
Yeah, but also part of the hobby, isn't it? It's like it's nice to have nice things, which is
and getting
nothing
to
wrong
upgrade
with
and
that
do
at all.
upgrade the
Love
apps
it.
on the NAS and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, massive thank you to everybody, especially those that are very technically minded, to put their advice and also experience, because I think experience makes a big difference in situations like this as well. And having had real world experience of either losing data or knowing that they could, so they did something about it before they had the terrible moment of, oh no, all my data's gone. So I think this is why we love this, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah,
it's so much better than doing like a recorded one and then just putting it online. I love the conversations, especially through the comments.
and we learn as well, which is really cool.
Definitely.
Well, I say we learn. I'm talking very much about myself. Certainly in this episode, where I have learned a lot. So yeah, big thanks for that, Joel. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone commenting, and thank you everyone for watching as well. So it's always lovely to see everyone tuning in live. If you're watching this after the fact, you can watch us live. We go live every Friday at 4:30 p.m. Or you can rewatch any of, except when we don't have internet. 99.9% complete. And then if what was I going to say? And then if I've gone now.
Sorry.
It's all right. You can always watch any of our videos as well. So you can always go back and rewatch any of the videos that we've done live as well at any time. Please make sure that you go onto our Facebook and YouTube channels, hit that subscribe button, that like button. The more you like and share our videos, the better it helps us sort of spread the word about what we do here on Photography Out Loud and us as a company, Cambria Photography. It's always wonderful having you all here. Joel, have you got anything to say before we finish the stream? Back up.
Just have a think this weekend. Yeah, back up. Remember, 2 is 1 and 1 is none.
That's
Should make a t-shirt about that,
eh? Oh yeah, lots of t-shirts.
Just a massive thank you to everybody. It's been great this week to have so many comments.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. Yeah. Right, that's it. We'll see you next week when we'll be joined live with Molly Darlington, Canon Ambassador. Until then, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye now.